45, there they are. Hey guys, I'm not sure what happened. I'm freaking out here. You know, they put me in charge of this thing and this is where we end up. So I am making sure we've got everything in here. Guys, so sorry. Let me know that you're here. You should all be getting in the chat right now. I'm going to share the notes with you, and we're gonna jump in here. Hey, listen, if you're a first timer, welcome. This is as good as it gets. I am so sorry for the 10-minute delay, but it looks like there's about 50 of you in here. So thank you. Do me a favor. Let me know that you're here. Sue says hello. I'm looking at the chat. We've got our team. It's obviously a user error because it was up and running here. And so great. Val's there. I see her. Guys, let us know you're here. If this is your first time, welcome. If you've been here 1, 2, 3, 4 times, let us know. But we're 10 minutes into this thing already, and we've got an amazing jam-packed deal. So I'm going to jump in. Welcome to the Transformational Leadership Series webinar. It's our 4th in the series in partnership with the Economic Alliance, Houston Port Region, and Metter Staffing Services. On behalf of myself, Rick Torres, and Right Now Leadership, welcome. We are jumping in. Good to see everybody. Chelsea, Marietta, great. Michelle, Patty, good to see you, Patty. Billy, Alicia, thank you for coming in. Grady, thanks for being with us. We've got an action-packed deal today, and I'm going to jump right in with the slides, and we're gonna get this thing, because I really got a special guest today. We're going to talk about some things, but in the ever-changing world of hiring, it's changing daily, and so I want to bring you some real-time thoughts and conversation before we end up today. So I'm going to start sharing my. I am going to start moving through the slides. As you can see, we're in the 3 C's of hiring. That sticks. And so if you guys don't know me, you can look at the slides. I'm not going to go into this. This is what I do for a living. I promise I do it better most of the time. But I've been a growth catalyst in working in the growth industry, leadership development industry for quite a few years. And I love adding value to people. So I'm excited about being here with you today, and especially about our guests that I'll share with you in just a minute. So let's talk about the 3 C's of hiring, which are competency, character, and culture. And so we're gonna get into that together. I love the quote that Peter Drucker has on there, and he says this: of all the decisions that an executive makes, the people decisions are the most important. I don't know about you guys, but in today's ever-changing world of candidates and hiring and retention, the reality is it's people skills. It's being able to communicate and deal with each other that are so important. So let me ask you guys a question as we get started. In today's hiring market, do you really know what you're getting when you're hiring someone? How well do you know? How well have you been able to vet that process? You know, there's a lot of questions around hiring and the candidate pool in today's market. Will they fit our culture, right? Can they do the job? Will they show up on time? How long are they going to stay before they leave, right? What kind of emotional challenges are they bringing to the table? These are a lot of the questions that we're asking, or at least that we're thinking. And you know, prior to COVID, you were able to be probably a little more selective in our hiring with our people. You knew the pay rate, and there wasn't a lot of haggling over that necessarily on the front end. People were glad to have a job, and they were excited to be working. They knew if they worked hard that they would get greater opportunities within those companies to be able to make more money. But those conversations are a little bit different now, and that's really why we wanted to talk about this. If you are still convinced or still not convinced of the importance of making the right hire, let's look at a few more statistics. You should have your notes if you haven't downloaded them already. I encourage you to do that. You'll get this replay later as well, along with the notes if you need them. But you should have the notes. Let's take a look at some of the statistics in the margins of your notes there. And as we look at those, contrary to popular belief, the reality is technical skills, which is really how we would measure hiring employees, can they do the job, is not the primary reason why most new hires are failing. And so it's important to understand that and take a look at that as we're going into this process. Leadership IQ studied over 5,000 hiring managers from 312 public, private businesses and healthcare organizations who hired over 20,000 employees over the study period, and this is what they learned. And so this is what we're going to take a look at. Of new hires, why new hires fail, and I won't read through all of these because of time, but the top two. 26% of new hires fail because they can't accept feedback. The criticism, I wouldn't really call it criticism, but the accountability to their job. 23% because they're unable to understand and manage emotions. So this is really critical in asking the question, what is the key to hiring employees that stick? They're going to fit the culture. They're going to be a part of who you are and what you do as a company. And they're going to stay, the retention. We'll talk about that as well. So the 3 C's of hiring great employees that stick. What's the key to those, and what are the C's? I want to talk to you about that first of all. The typical job interview process focuses on the idea of do I like them, and are they technically competent? That's where a lot of the hiring was. Do they fit? Am I comfortable with them? Can they technically do the job? But let me ask you a question. Do technical skills matter if the employee isn't teachable? What if that employee alienates their coworkers by the way they behave or act, or they don't share your company's values or your vision? What if they lack the emotional intelligence necessary to do their job, right? It doesn't matter how technically proficient they are if they can't relate or get along with people. And that's a growing challenge, especially as you look across generations with the millennials that are working, but with the new crop of workers that come in. One of the trainings I do, we talk about that generation gap with these Gen Zs who are entering the workplace. It's a whole different game. What does that look like, and how do we bridge that gap? And that's another topic for another conversation. But let's look at the 3 C's of hiring a great team, okay, and great employees. The first C is competency. We'll talk about that. Second one is character. And the third one is culture. So let's talk about competency a little bit. When we talk about competency, there's 2 questions and 3 keys that I want to present to you really quickly. So the first competency question is this: can they do the job, right? That's the typical question that we ask. Based on the job description and the expectations, can they do the job? But there's another question that's important when we're dealing with competency, and it's tied to the skills that they bring to the organization. This question actually speaks to growth and the ability to innovate and lead others. And the question is, are they teachable, right? So competency is about their skill set, their training, their ability to do the job, right? And so they have to also be teachable. Are they willing to learn and to take correction? Now, when considering the competency of new hires, there's also 3 keys, and I want to briefly mention those to you. They're in your notes. I won't go into them in depth again to save some time since we started a little late, but I do want to mention them to you. The first key is critical thinking, right? Critical thinking. Can they analyze situations and solve problems? The second key to competency is collaboration. You may have the skills that you need, but if you can't work with others and function as part of a team, what good do those skills do? And you won't last long on the job. And the third key to competency, again, we won't spend a lot of time on it. We actually did a training on this one. It's actually the second one I think we did on effective communication, is communication. This is becoming one of the biggest challenges with today's workforce. And like everything else, this is a skill that you can learn and you can improve. And the more you understand how you communicate, how others communicate, the stronger the team, the stronger the employee. So those are the keys to competency. So let's also talk about hiring for character, right? The second C. Hire for character, train for skill. Peter Schultz said that. I love that quote. If the hiring process, in the hiring process, education, experience, and skill are all documentable, right? They're verifiable. A candidate's character, on the other hand, is really kind of difficult to understand, to pin down, to really get a clear picture of, but it's not impossible. I actually share some questions in your notes at the very back, at the end of your note page, is some questions you can ask in the hiring process to focus in on competency, character, and culture. A candidate's character is critical to their success on your team and in your organization. If you compromise on character, you risk hurting your employees, the culture, your investors, and your public reputation, right? And so that's really important to consider that and to examine that when you're hiring. Okay, discerning character. Now, while difficult, it's not impossible, right? So in order to hire for character, we have to first define what we're talking about when we talk about character. So let's take a look at that real briefly. Character. It's how someone thinks, feels, and behaves when no one's looking, right? What do you do in private? What does that look like? And what comes out of you when pressure's applied? Now, we could talk for a long time about this last 18 months. We've all had pressure applied. And if we could talk face to face, if I could see you, if we were together, I'd be asking this question: how many of you have had pressure applied? And when that pressure applied in your life over this last year, what came out of you you're not very proud of? Okay, if we're honest, we've probably all got moments over the last 18 months when the pressure came, and what came out of us is something that we weren't very proud of. We're like, where did that come from? Well, the truth is character. It is that which has always been within us, right? And so if we're not clear, if we don't understand it, if we don't examine it, our own character, if we don't understand what defines it and where it comes from within us, right, we're going to find ourselves in situations and places that won't be very positive for the organization, the team, or for ourselves. Okay, so take a look at this next slide. And I love what it says in here. Determining good character is not just about avoiding risk, because this is critical that we understand when we're looking and trying to hire towards character. It's about maximizing gain. Unlike skills, character can't be taught. It is something that people have. You can bring it out. A person can refine it, but you as an employer can't teach characters to someone. You can't send them to a character school, a finishing school, right? Back in the day. It doesn't work that way, right? And so the character that we have, that we bring into the job, that we bring into relationship, we can refine it, we can improve it on ourselves if we choose to do so, but it can't be taught to us from someone else. So how do we discern character in our interviews? Again, another conversation, but you've got those questions. And if you've got more questions about that and you're looking at applying this into your workforce and into hiring, let me know. I'd be glad to follow up with you and talk you through some of those questions and ways to do that. But it begins by asking questions that reveal character, right? That's really critical. Questions like how they have dealt with difficult situations or coworkers, or how they faced adversity. Those are all ways that we deal with character. All right, one last thing on character I want to talk about. So hiring to character is all about asking the right questions. And there's 5 areas of questions that we build in. Again, I've got this resource for you around teamwork, perseverance, creativity, their integrity and honesty, and their adaptability. When looking at character, those are the 5 categories and questions that can help reveal their character. And again, in your notes, you've got a better description of these that you can look at, and I'm going to move through those. But again, feel free to reach out. I'd love to talk to you about how to develop an interview process that will help you discern and understand the character of the people and how they'll fit with your culture, your company, and your values. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about culture just really briefly. This is an interesting one because every company and organization has a culture. They either establish their culture, which we'll talk about, by their vision and their values, right? How they live and interact with each other, or their culture will be established by the loudest personality or loudest voice on the team or in the group. See, because not only do companies have culture, but individual people have culture as well. They bring their culture into your company. And that culture will either mesh and fit with your company or add to your company, or it will come against or rub against or create challenges within your company and your culture. And so culture is critical. This Deloitte survey of 13,000 millennial employees found that some 7% of workers between the ages of 24 and 36, they say they dislike their employer's culture so much they intend to quit their job in the next 2 years. Now, this is prior to COVID. We've got a lot of changing dynamics over the last year, but understanding culture is critically important, especially to this incoming Gen Z workforce that's coming in. These 20, 21-year-olds that are about to enter the workforce, although they have never not had a cell phone in their hands, the smartphone technology has been with them since birth. One of the things they're craving and looking for in jobs is actually relationship and interaction with their team and their employees, and working in an area that fits their passions, right? So here's the truth about culture. It can't be taught. Culture has got to be lived, Okay, and culture is what's lived out within our teams. So let me take a look at this next slide. So what is culture? It's the product of the organization's vision and values, what guides us, and their belief, what drives us. And it's lived internally with employees and externally with the customers and clients. So it's critical in understanding your culture. Culture cannot be taught, it is caught. It rubs off. And there's ways to check and see how well your culture is defined and understood by your employees. Because like I said, everyone has one. Again, we won't spend a lot of time with that, but I wanted to make sure that you understood that. And vision, clear vision, shared vision, and values that can be measured and that are understood, actionable, are critical to influencing and defining the culture of your organization and company. One of the trainings and workshops we do helps companies clarify and define or redefine their vision and their values to make them actionable and not just words on a piece of paper or words on the wall. All right? Are you guys doing okay? I'm going kind of fast. I've got a special guest waiting here, and I really want to bring her in and really talk about some stuff that's pressing today. So let's take a look at one more slide about culture. Hiring for culture fit and culture add surged to the first from fifth in the last 5 years as the most important factor in recruiting top talent. There's two things we look at with culture. It's a culture fit and it's a culture add. You don't just want to hire people that are clones of the people you have, because that stifles creativity and innovation. You want people who can fit and adapt to your culture, who will follow and share the vision and engage the values, but you also want people who bring a value add to your company, a culture add. They make your culture stronger and better by bringing them on your team. So we don't just look for culture fits, we look for culture adds. And that's the next slide that I want to show you really quickly. A culture fit plus culture add. While we want people who represent our company's vision and values and have high character and a great work ethic, which we do, we don't want a company of clones or robots that all think alike, act alike, and look alike. We need to look at the culture piece from the two lenses, culture fit and culture add. And I could talk a lot about that, but I want to, again, for sake of time, I'm going to share a couple things with you, and then I'm going to bring on, there's a teaser. And we'll come back for 1 second before I bring her on. So I just want to give you a couple more thoughts on culture fit and culture add. Hiring to culture add is all about what the candidate brings to the team, the value add. You want diversity for creativity and innovation. You want people who bring fresh ideas and solutions, and you want people who make your company and team better. Culture add questions are all about thinking outside of the box, not just culture fit questions, but culture add. So when you're thinking about your organization, when you're thinking about hiring, when you're thinking about the 3 C's, competency, character, and culture, we're really good at competencies. We struggle sometimes with understanding how to define an interview towards character and towards our culture. And those are critical if we want to find employees that not only stick, but we retain them. Right? Because that's a big challenge that we have. And I actually have some other notes that we'll share with you at the end. I've given you some other information because one of the questions is, if you're a hiring manager, just put HR in there. I'd love to see the hiring managers that are here with us today. But if you're a hiring manager, you know the cost to replace an employee. In fact, we're going to talk about that in just a second of what that looks like. But you know all the time and energy you put into bringing someone on board, you get them in, you're onboarding them, you're investing in them, you're growing them, they're fitting in, and then 6 weeks later or a month later, 2 months later, they're gone. It doesn't just cost you in terms of finances, but think about the time and the energy and the emotion and the relationship and the investment you've made in someone, right? That cost is astronomical. Usually they say it's 1.5 times that employee's salary minimum is the cost to replace that employee. And so this is really a critical thing that we're talking about and the thing that we're doing. And it's important to understand that as we move forward. Okay, enough said. I want to give the rest of our time to our special guest, and we're actually going to talk and dig into really where things are today. So I'm going to briefly introduce to you and welcome in, and I'm going to actually shift over and take us off of the slide presentation. And I'm going to move our camera Hey, Melinda.
Hi.
So I'm going to welcome in Melinda Torreson. It's just a coincidence that we share the same last name. But I'm excited to bring her here with you guys today because if I'm looking at an expert in the field of staffing, of job placements, candidates, hiring, all around this topic, you can't find more of an expert than the person sitting right here to my left. And I say that not as she's my wife, but I say that as a professional who's watched her in the industry for over 30 years, give her life to the staffing industry, to candidates, to clients, to companies in this crazy world that we're living in. I thought, what better than to actually allow her and to bring her in to talk about what it's really looking like today. So we're gonna do an interview process. The first thing I want to ask Melinda, one, welcome. So we're glad that you're here. And tell us real quickly, give us a condensed your journey with Metter Staffing and the staffing world. Let people understand. I know you only look 25, 30 years old, but tell us a little bit about your journey of how you got here so people that don't know you know what you do in your experience.
Well, thank you, Rick. Thanks for having me. And God, thank you for those kind words. That was really nice. Yeah, so the short story of how I ended up in this amazing industry and, of course, at Metter Staffing Services is, for those of you who have never heard of Metter Staffing, it is a family-owned business that my father, Ben Metter, who is the CEO and founder of our organization, started in 1968. So we've been doing this thing called staffing for 50 plus years. And of course, you know, my intent growing up in a family-owned business, sitting at the dinner table with the founder and the CEO, who was my dad, I never had any intention of ever going to work for Metter Staffing. And long story short, never say never, because you just might end up, God might lead you to the very place that you're trying to run from or you're thinking you don't want to be at. So I've now been here at Metter Staffing for 33 years. I've been in the role of president and COO for, gosh, I guess the past 5 years, and have had to lead the organization through a lot of interesting trials and crisis type of situations. So, but
what was your first job?
Oh my goodness.
When you first came in, maybe it was before you, like as a child labor laws. I'm sure Ben Metter had you working at 6, 7 years old.
Absolutely.
What was your first job in the staffing world?
Oh my goodness. My first job was, of course, before computers, before cell phones, before technology. I literally had to file resumes for at that point in time, 40 plus recruiters who worked out of our Pasadena office. I typed resumes on an IBM Selectric typewriter. Yeah, I've had a lot of different jobs that I did not earn.
And then
anything.
As you went up through the ranks, what are some of the positions you held before you got to the COO position?
Oh goodness. So of course I had the privilege, really looking back now, of working as a temporary employee, being placed by, at that point in time, Darla Haygood, who oversaw our temporary division. So I worked as a temporary employee. I worked as a receptionist. So I worked the front desk. I worked as a staffing consultant, actually recruiting and placing people. Then I actually partnered with Darla and oversaw Temporary Systems Inc. And so we had the honor of literally helping probably 100 plus staffing companies get into the temporary.
That's all across the United States, right? That was all over. Yeah. So the relationship you guys have had. So how long has Metter Staffing been? You've been there over 30, 34 years or so. How long has Metter Staffing been around? And I know this, but you may not.
52, going on 53 years.
53 years. Mm-hmm. And in that time period, there's been several different offshoots and branches and different parts of the company that you guys have done. I asked her these questions because I think it's really important that you guys understand. I'm honored that my wife is here, but this isn't about that. What it's about is someone who's had over 30 years and really her whole life experience in the hiring, candidates, jobs, clients, working in industry from clerical to industry to direct hire to contract. She's had her head down and working in this industry for over 30 years. And so I couldn't think of anyone better that could talk about what's happening right now. And I know we're going to get into this, but have you ever seen anything like what we're in right now?
No.
Okay. we're gonna talk about that, right? So 30 some years, I think your dad has said the same thing. Never seen what we're going through today. And I say this to you guys. People are saying, well, this is a new normal. I want to shake that paradigm for you real quickly. The new normal is the moment you're living in right now. There will be another normal tomorrow at this time. And I'm kidding, but I'm not kidding. If we start wrapping our heads around this idea that we're not going back to something, And the new normal may not last more than 24 hours. And that sounds crazy, but it's the reality of where we're living, because things are in constant change. Government doesn't know really everything that's going on. Business and industry have questions. Candidates and employees that are working or unemployed, there's just a lot happening that all intertwine and interweave with each other. So it's been crazy. So tell me, let's do this. I'm going to ask her to take us on a journey. Let's get in a time machine and let's go back about 2 years before COVID, before the thought of COVID. Reset for us what the candidate world and client customer world, the job market looked like before COVID. Can you remember that? And you guys are all going, when was that? Was there a time before COVID?
Yeah. It's honestly difficult to even think back to, what was it like, 14, 15 months ago, but just to paint a picture. And of course, I speak from a perspective of the staffing industry, which really gives us opportunity to speak from the vantage point of all the various clients that we work with, encompassing all different types of industry and services and whatnot. But honestly, before COVID, we were in somewhat of a talent shortage. Of course, those of you online who partner with Economic Alliance, Patty Bell knows this. The industry was preparing for, or already in the midst of the baby boomers, that whole generation leaving the workforce, which was going to be significant. So we were already in the throes of how do we find the people that are literally going to be stepping into the roles when this huge generation leaves the workforce. So we were already in the staffing world, had been talking about that, years prior to COVID. But it looks so different in how we interact with our clients. It was not unusual for us in the staffing industry when we would receive a job request from a customer. We can fill that position. If it was a temporary, send to start, we can fill those positions in 24 hours.
Send to start, what does that mean?
So that basically means a client calls us up and, for example, they might say, hey, Melinda, I need a receptionist for a maternity leave, or I need a temp to hire type of position. So that would actually be, we would look for somebody, send them out. Many times, of course, we're working with our customers and they are actually interviewing the employee, but it was not uncommon for us, and our account managers, if they're online, they know too.
I think Christy's with us, and
so
a couple others.
Knows. It was like not unusual. If you were working with Christy, she would actually tell you, "Oh, no problem, Rick. We'll have 4 to 5 candidates
for me to choose from.
I will submit their resumes to you within 24 hours.
You'd have people to me within 24 hours to look at.
Candidates who were vetted.
I want you guys to remember this. We're setting this up. If you don't already know, we're headed somewhere.
They were vetted, interested in your position, and ready to go. So that was, pretty commonplace in how we would operate.
So then,
COVID.
So there were jobs that were out there. There was enough candidates, so they got to pick and choose. So candidates, it wasn't like candidates were just they weren't picking and choosing. They were actually looking and blessed to have that opportunity to work with these companies. So then we hit this world of COVID. So I just want to spend a second here. What did you see in COVID that you began to see as trends? We won't get into the whole COVID thing, but as COVID came on and people were sent home and then people were figuring out trying to come back and just all of that craziness, looking from being in the middle of the industry, working with clients and working with candidates, what were some things you started seeing and going, man, we can see some trends that might be happening? Because then I want to ask you about what are we actually seeing now, right? But what did you start noticing? What stood out to you in the middle of COVID? You're going, man, this is forever changing and we need to.
Yeah. Well, and interesting, of course, you go back to March, April, and May of 2020, and you have to remind yourself that during those times, it was literally like the water faucet just turned off. We went from really thriving in the direct hire arena, even our temporary space, with the clerical and industrial sector. And it was like the water faucet just turned off, and you literally saw hundreds of people that were laid off from their temporary position. That quarter, when COVID first started, it was, oh my goodness.
A lot of things
we've
hit
gone
at the same
from
time.
Just, having jobs and an influx and a flow of candidates to just an immediate, shortage. And even in the staffing industry, so many, staffing executives literally had to, like so many of our customers, you begin seeing a 10 to 20% reduction of, an immediate laying off of people.
Yeah.
Then the second stage was furlough. Then the next stage was salary reductions of, typically what we saw in the staffing industry was 20%. And so it was just this interesting world. Fortunately at Matter Staffing, that's where core values really come into play. And we just decided, as a business that we're not going to do that because we are going to really honor and speak into our core values. So that meant we really had to cut expenses in so many other
Well, I think it's really important to point out too, just the Matter Staffing example, right? How do we keep our employees? You don't make a decision like that in the middle of a crisis. Your company and you guys that are out there and working companies, you need to be thinking. You may not be able to predict a pandemic, but you should be thinking proactively about things that could come your way and how do we position ourselves in strength for whatever comes. And so the pandemic comes, you're recognizing all this, you're moving through it now. We're close to a year later and you're starting to go, okay, jobs are starting to come back. Things are changing a little bit. Thank goodness we're in Texas. We won't get into that.
Okay.
But so things are changing a little bit and you guys are starting to go, okay, where are we headed? What's coming? What were you seeing? Like, oh my gosh, I think this is where we're going. What was going on?
So the trends that we saw, back to your original question, even looking at, kind of going through the summer months and then as we were moving into the fall, we started seeing an opening up of jobs. It was, and now it is like, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. It was just this pent up demand that has now been released. But some of the trends, that we saw were, you did have to recognize COVID, and we still do, that there is still, there's fear. People have lost loved ones from COVID. People have had family members, in the hospital that have really suffered because of COVID. So that's what we had to recognize. And I think even still moving forward is that COVID is real. Fortunately you have your vaccinations and of course, we're moving through that piece of the process, but there was fear. Then we also saw, where of course we went home, for several months and people, were working remote. We still have, many companies in Texas and in the greater Houston area that, I'm hearing a trend. June 1 seems to be a big date as to when most companies, if they haven't gone back, that they are going to be going back. And so
expecting people to be back in the office?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's a whole, HR, I just have to say, we pray for you every day, Matter Staffing, because you have probably the hardest job, kind of going through this whole COVID situation.
Yeah.
But you now have a mentality or philosophy where we have a lot of candidates call us, I want a job working 100% remote. What we're hearing in the staffing industry, for us too, as we're hearing kind of the 80-20, that it's really going to be about 80% are in the office and 20% remote. So we're starting to see a shift though, talking with a lot of our clients, they are really in the reality of what jobs can be remote. The huge trend is, which, back in March of this year, 2021, almost to the anniversary date of COVID, being declared a global pandemic, it's the stimulus. When the third stimulus was released, it literally, and speaking for the staffing industry, and probably speaking for all of our customers, it was literally like just an immediate halt.
A halt in what?
Candidates literally drying up. Candidates, I'm choosing not to go back to work. I'm removing myself from the job market. The job boards, which of course we rely heavily on those, literally saw, especially with Indeed and ZipRecruiter, which are the top two job boards right now, have seen a drastic decrease. People just aren't searching for jobs.
So let's talk for our remaining time. I want to get to a couple other things that I want people to hear from you. So just what's the job? So looking at it today, like right now, give us a sense of what candidate and customer or client market is looking like. What do you see? Because you get to see both. With the candidates that you guys want to hire, people that are coming in, and the customers who need to hire. And so you got two, like each ear has got like earful.
Right.
So what is it like right now today? What can people, if you guys are looking to hire, you're wanting to hire, what is the expectation? What are we running into?
Oh,
And we only got a couple of minutes here. I want to get to a couple other things, okay?
And I see, like in the chat, I see some of like my partners, you know, my teammates, Christy and Samantha, and some of them, like you really, where do you even begin to start? Let me start with the candidate world.
Okay.
What we see with the candidates, of course, like I said earlier, you know, and with the stimulus and the unemployment being extended, you know, the additional money that they're receiving, you know, $300 a week from the federal government just really put a huge, like I said, literally just a stop with finding candidates to fill these jobs. Because like I said earlier, you have pent up demand where a lot of our clients who had laid off people or furloughed, it was like the floodgates started opening and they began hiring again. So the number of open jobs that we have at Better Staffing right now, just to speak to that perspective of the job market, it is a number that we've never seen before. Like I said, we're used to, especially in the temp world, you know, we move very quick. So we don't see week to week going from a Friday to a Monday of having a huge number of jobs. Now, maybe on the direct hire side, which of course we were setting records prior to COVID, our direct hire group is still just seeing significant, you know, inroads or requests from our customer base. So, but when I say, and I really feel like I speak as the ambassador for Better Staffing, that we need people. And so, you know, I'm talking to a lot of our, you know, partners in the community. And when I say we have hundreds of job openings, we literally have hundreds of job openings. And it's all across the spectrum.
Okay, now,
you know, types of jobs that we have.
So there's job openings. So I've heard this, I've said this a couple of times. I heard some other people say it. So we think about that as a candidate shortage. But it really isn't a candidate shortage. The candidates are out there. It's a candidate motivation problem. They're not motivated to go to work right now because they don't necessarily have. We're not going to get into politics. We're not going to go down that road. I don't want to get your blood boiling about certain things, but I want us to understand. So remember, the topic today is hiring employees that stick and retaining those employees. And so you can't hire the employees that stick if you don't understand the market, the candidates, what's out there. How do you as a customer and a client begin to adapt and adjust and innovate to keep these candidates that are there that want to work and they're coming in? How do you entice a candidate who can sit at home and make money and not necessarily come into work right now? And there's going to be a reckoning, right? At some point, no matter what the government does or what companies, there's a reckoning. I imagine some customers are going to kind of look down their list and say, we had all these people, we offer them jobs that didn't show, don't bring them up to me again. So you're going to, you know, there's just a lot of stuff that's going on. So what would you say in the last, about 5 minutes here before we finish up? We got about 5 or so minutes. What would you tell customers, and if any candidates, if you guys are looking, but what would you tell them? How would we help them work with you guys, work on their own? It isn't, listen, I'm promoting Better Staffing, obviously, they're a partner with us, but it really isn't ultimately about Better Staffing. You got jobs and you have work that needs to be filled. I want to help you figure out how to best do that and find those people to get them through the door and to get them to stay, you know, long enough to fit in the.
When you go through a global pandemic like what we've gone through, and you know, I think the two words that I've heard most this past year, unprecedented and pivot. And so, you know, as a leader, I believe that the takeaway for me, the best thing that I could have done was you have to immerse yourself in the reality of what is going on. So you have to be in the trenches, you know, day to day, being next to your people, you know, hearing the frustrations, what's going on. So not only with your internal staff, but for me personally, which I believe that people who did the year of COVID really well, you've got to be connected. So not only connected with your employees and your clients and your candidate base, but you got to be connected with an organization such as Economic Alliance, your local chambers. You know, I have never relied as much as I have this year on our community, you know, Baker Ripley,
Chamber of Commerce,
I could go on
the
and
churches.
on.
I mean, because there's a workforce within the churches.
Yes,
No.
and that's really what we're doing at Mother Staffing is.
And schools, right? I mean, I don't mean,
oh my gosh.
right? Partnering with the colleges and the schools, actually just going directly to, I know you've talked about that. There's some companies that are saying, how do we just go straight to the high school and start partnering? Because, I mean, it's creative thinking. It's innovative thinking. Like, well, we got to get them in a degree. We got to get out and they got to have all this experience. Some companies are saying, let us do that. If we can bring in someone out of high school or certifications or junior college or whatever and say, just come straight partner with us and then raise them up. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting time.
It is. And so, some of the things that we've done at Matter and then, kind of speaking to and hopefully, kind of sharing.
I mean, if you guys have questions, I'm going to just put them in here. I'm going to we'll see if we can answer one or two. I'm looking at the chat. So while she's talking right now, if you've got a question for her while she's talking, I'm going to start looking to see if I can get some of your questions. Go ahead, Melinda, but I would love you guys to ask a question, and we'll see if we can't get to them.
But some of the, neat things that we've done, of course, Sanderson College, just an amazing partner. And, we are really trying to align ourselves with organizations such as San Jack, but creating internships and not just coming out of the junior college or community college, but literally coming out of our local high schools with your graduating seniors. So, but to speak to what is the reality of the marketplace right now, first and foremost, you've got to have an understanding of what has been taking place the last, 6 months to a year. And so where we're at right now is having an understanding that even though, we tend to, or we thought, back in April when you saw unemployment rate shoot up to 14.7%, there are not databases just full of candidates who are ready to go back to work. So that, I always tell customers, I've just immersed myself in being face-to-face with customers and just really trying to educate them and come alongside them in a partnership. And I know Christy would probably speak to this too, is that this year we have really seen our customer base at Matter Staffing. They need us now more than ever before. And it's not just to place the candidates, but how can we come alongside them and come up with solutions to solve their staffing crisis. And the interesting thing in the staffing industry right now, we are all in the same predicament. You participated with a lot of other staffing execs across the nation. The nation is in a crisis. Yeah. We've never seen this before, where we are all, kind of in the same boat. The key to hiring right now is flexibility. Okay. Cannot stress that word enough. Flexibility. You've got to rethink the way that people maybe do their job. When I hear some of our customers, what they used to be able to do, for example, we had a customer, Rick, that would call us up and say, I need a candidate who is proficient in, Spanish, English, bilingual, heavy bilingual. They've got to be a critical thinker. They're going to make $14 an hour, and they have to be able to come on board and work any shift. And then we'll decide later what shift they're going to work. That doesn't happen anymore. You've got to really rethink your shifts, the hours of your shift. Just flexibility is the key. We've partnered with a lot of customers. We used to fill jobs, a year ago that the starting pay was $10 an hour.
Okay. So what's that look like now?
It's very difficult to fill a position making $10
because the employees or the candidates just they won't.
And most of who are online. They're making more money collecting unemployment. They've received a stimulus check. They've had their tax return. So they've elected to, I can make more money sitting at home doing nothing than I would if I took a job. So we've had to come alongside a lot of customers. We do a lot of salary surveys and just have some really heart-to-heart conversations about this is where your pay needs to be. This is what you need to change in the job. And we're having a lot of conversations with customers about job descriptions, and we literally have some companies that they're used to reviewing a resume and the response, that resume just didn't wow me. Those days are gone. Yeah. You've really got to, you just don't have the luxury of being able to kind of make those types of choices.
So a couple questions, just Patty Bell with the Alliance says, what can candidates do to elevate their application in a sea of other applications, right? How do you, I would think from what you just said, Patty, here's my answer. I would tell them, put on the job, I will show up. I will take whatever pay. I will accept the offer. Because from what you're saying, I mean, you just need those people that are not going to just go through the motions and then no show. You need the people that are saying, no, I'm really going to, I need to work. Right. So she's asking that real quick, and I've got a couple others. Is there? So what would you say to a candidate? How do they get to the top where you're going to work on?
Well, number one, oh my goodness, Patty, that's like such a good question. I would say, most companies are really shifted to, you can only apply for their jobs online. I recommend to everybody, coming to search for a job at Mentor Staffing, pick up the phone and try to connect,
call the employer,
with one of us, call the employer, reach out. Okay. I personally don't think that a resume should only have like what you had alluded to earlier, Rick, competency or your skill set. It's customers today are looking for character. And I will tell you the other huge issue that we're seeing across the board with all of our clients, we can get the job filled, hopefully, but then once the job is filled, attendance is a huge issue in our customer base. People just not being able to show up for work. So if you can show work ethic, character, some form or fashion, or method of putting that on your application. But we keep stressing to candidates searching for jobs right now, your opportunity is right now because of the hundreds, millions of people who have taken themselves off of the job market. And so that's my recommendation.
So Gabe asked us, are there opportunities for employers to think more creatively about how they create roles to motivate employees? So I think, Gabe, what you're asking is creating positions in companies that are focused on the motivation, retention, and engagement. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking, Gabe, but that's kind of what I'm hearing there. What are the opportunities for employers? Do you think that's important for them to start thinking about positions that are actually employee, like we did last month? If you didn't watch it, go back and watch the last month, which was on employee engagement, right? How do you engage those employees, and what positions do you create to keep them engaged, to retain those employees?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Dave, that's like such a great question. I believe today, more so than ever before. And I know we talk about this a lot at Mentor Staffing with our customers is, you've got to engage with employees, regardless of the age of the employee or the generation. You have to have understanding that what we have just gone through this past year, it is across the board. Like I said, regardless of generation and your age, people have gone through trauma. People are dealing with so many issues, be it you had to do virtual school, you've lost a loved one because of COVID, you've had COVID yourself, the number of times that we've gone back to the office, then you're exposed, you got to work remote, the back and forth. You have to have understanding that everybody has been impacted this past year in some form or fashion. And so you've got to be able to relate, have conversation. It's the most demanding, I believe, in the history, those of us, we've not gone through a pandemic. What is required of leaders today is insurmountable.
Well, that's why what we're doing and why we partnered with the Alliance and with you guys is to really add value, to just drop in, everything we're doing. And I'm going to ask you guys to start thinking of this. We've got one more question. We're going to go over just a little bit because we start a little bit. If you need to go, that's fine. If you're here, you're going to get the replay. But if you can hang for a couple more minutes, I want to finish and kind of tie some things off for you guys and invite you to next month and what we're going to talk about. But it's so critical that there's 3 generations, if not more, in the workforce right now, and you've got, and it's so different. And if we don't understand that, and if we're not going to be flexible, like you said, that was critical, the pivoting, the flexibility, the understanding, it's hard and it takes more energy, but leadership is difficult. Leadership just isn't about getting a job done. Leadership is about growing people, not just managing people. We can manage people to a task, but that doesn't mean we have leaders. And so this whole process and rethinking leadership is critical. If you're thinking about how do we deal with the generations, how are we dealing with this workforce, the millennials, I'd love to talk to you about that. We do some training around understanding the generation gaps and how to bridge the generation. So let me know and send a message. I think I had one more question in here, Justine, maybe, sorry. We're seeing quite a few candidates that are not wanting to work in the office and remain remote. What is your recommendation for time? What's your thoughts to them? And then we'll try to wrap up.
Yeah, that's such a good question that so many of our customers are dealing with today. And I think you just really have to what I would recommend is you really have to, especially if you're in a leadership position, you have to assess your organization. You have to really rethink the whole way that your business is structured. And the question that's always going in my mind is, what's best for the company? To kind of take people or names out of it. What is best for the organization? And so that's first question that I would ask: what's best for your organization or your business as a whole? And then I think that, I see a lot of companies and conversations that I'm having is they really are being more flexible. For example, we always say IT people, introverts were living their best life in 2020. Right. Extroverts, we didn't like 2020, but introverts are like, yes, this is my dream. And so looking at the role of the company, do they really have to physically be in the office? But there are, for those of us that better staffing, we need to be in the office, but I do think that we have to look in the future moving forward, looking at your people, what are their needs? And, maybe having a, 1 day a week or once a month where you are able to work remote, because we have learned how to do remote well, but we've noticed we thrive
the energy of people
when we're together.
So there's the plug. Next month, we're back in person at the Alliance. We've had 10 to 15 people there. We want to fill the room. I would love the energy of having you guys there. So I'm just going to plug. You're going to get the link to register for next month. We're going to talk about the power of high-performing teamwork and teams. And so we're going to be looking at that. But we want you there in person because there's energy. There's energy when we're together. And so that's really important. So the questions were great. I think that's most of the questions that we had there. And a couple of things that I heard you say at the end, Melinda, and that you kept saying, flexibility, the pivoting, the innovation, the creativity, the leaning in. You may not like things that are happening. And the reality is you can't do anything about it. It's happening. It is here. It is changing, and it's not going back. So we're either going to push against it. And if you ever kind of went whitewater rafting, they said, hey, you can get out of the boat and ride the waves. What do they tell you to do? Put your arms across your chest and lift your feet up. Don't put your feet down and try to stop yourself against the waves. You're going to break your legs. This wave that we're in right now, sometimes you just got to lift your legs up, put your arms over your chest, and you just got to ride it because you can't stop it. And so then what does that look like for your company? Those companies that are willing to innovate and have creative discussions are going to be the ones that are successful. And I will tell you, through the Alliance and the relationships there, through Better Staffing, they're more than just staffing. They're having these conversations every day. I remember we were doing 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, these lunch and learns with people then, talking about what does remote workplace look like? Just adding value and helping you, because if they can help you in figuring out how to go navigate this, obviously it's going to help their business and it's going to help the candidate as well. So there's great partnerships out there, and I want us to make sure that we're looking for those. So last couple of things I want to do, just give me another couple of minutes, please. First of all, we always ask 3 questions at the end of this, and I want you to take a second and do this. You can put it in the chat. That'll help me make sure you're learning some things from this. But 3 things I try to do with any presentation. We want to teach you something, that you'll learn something. I want to challenge you to live it. What are you going to do because of what you've learned? And then I want to ask you to lead in it. Who are you going to share it with, talk about it with, dialogue with? Because that's where creativity comes. We're stronger together and more powerful together, that mastermind, than we are apart. So what's something you've learned today? Just take a second on your notes or somewhere and write that down while I'm talking, because if you don't, the next thing's going to hit you in another 10 minutes. You'll be on and you'll have gone, man, there was some good stuff there, but I didn't grab it. What's one thing you can grab that you heard Melinda say, we talked about on the front end, or something that you learned or were reinforced? I'd love to see that in the chats as well. But then I want you to ask the next question. How is that thing that you learned going to impact how you're going to act or behave? Are you going to do anything different because of it? And then who do you need to talk to it about? Maybe you call someone at Meta, or call one of the staffing consultants, or one of the Christy or Sam or Renee, or who else am I missing? Latanya. So and talk to them and just look at those partnerships and ask the hard questions and be willing to go through some creative conversations to help us through this. Because like we said, normal is what you're experiencing today, but it may not be what you experience tomorrow. And so we've got to be flexible to move through that, but it's not easy. And so you don't have to do alone. So I want to encourage you in that. I'm going to, in your notes, there's another thing you've got there. I won't go through it, but it says the cost of a bad hire. If you needed any more reinforcement of why you need to get this right and why I'd love to help you, look at that chart I gave you, and it's breaking down the numbers of what it costs if you hire someone and they don't make it and you've got to rehire them. Those numbers are a little scary and it's a little overwhelming. So I want you to have that. And I'm going to jump back really quickly to this slide, real quick. And I want to show you the next presentation, just talk to you really quickly through that. I think we are slide start. All right, so just there's your timeout. There's that. Here's the next thing I just want to share with you. So next month, June 8th, we're going to talk about high performance teamwork. Okay, and there's a word here, Ubuntu. All right, I'm not going to tell you what it means. You got to show up next week. But it has to do with the conversation, the topic next week. So I'd love for you to register. That registration link is going to be dropped in here. You're going to get a follow-up email that's from us that's just going to say, hey, how did we do? How can we improve? I already know timeliness and figuring out our technology. But any other suggestions we want, there'll be a link to next month's June 8th, 12 to 1, live webinar and in person. If you show up next month, I'm going to have a stack of these books, the 17 Laws of Teamwork. And we're going to be giving those away to the people that are in person next week. So I'm excited about that. But we're going to talk about the idea of being stronger together and how do you build high-performing teams, right? How do you bring them together? How do they function together? How do they work together to ultimately accomplish and exceed the objective, the mission, and the vision of your organization? And so we'll talk about that next week. So I'm looking forward to that. And as always, I'm here to serve you guys. From employee training, from integration and engagement, to motivation, communication. This is what I love to do. And so if I can help you or serve you in any way, I would love to do that. And I look forward to continuing to partner with you. So I'm done here. I'm going to bring us back in. So Melinda, thank you so much for being with us. Sorry about the technical issues on the front end, but they're here to serve you. On behalf of the Economic Alliance, Matter Staffing Services, and Melinda Torreson and myself, with Right Now Leadership, we want to continue to add value to you because we believe that your best is yet to come. You were created for more. Your company was created for more influence and impact, future, and a hope. And don't believe that no matter where you are. And our desire is to help you grow, discover it, and walk it out. So let us know how we can help you. We'll see you next month. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. God bless you guys, and thanks for being with us. Bye, everybody.